Oh, me too. I could talk to Michael all day. So this all culminates in Francis coming back on a flight, and he makes this comment. I just want to hear if you guys even understand what this means. So on the flight back from Mongolia, Pope Francis was asked what he thought about the book, The Synodal Processes of Pandora's Box. In response, he recalled a conversation he had with a Carmelite prioress who told him they were afraid he was going to change doctrine through the synod. This is Francis now. If you go to the root of these ideas, you will find ideologies. Always, when one wants to detach from the path of communion in the church, what always pulls it apart is ideology, and they accuse the church of this or that, but they never make an accusation of what is true. It is made up of sinners. They never speak of sin. They defend a doctrine like distilled water that has no taste and is not true Catholic doctrine. That is in the creed. Like, I don't even know what he's talking about so far, but and that very often scandalizes. How scandalous is the idea that God became flesh, that God became man, that Our Lady kept her virginity? This scandalizes. None of those things scandalize Catholics. Not the creed, not that God became man, not that Our Lady was a virgin, none of those things.
Right.
So if you go to the root of these ideas, you find ideologies always when one wants to detach from the path of communion in the church. What he basically said a whole bunch of words, but did not say anything about whether he's going to try and change doctrine.
Yep, that's right. He is a master of deflection.
He doesn't answer the question.
He doesn't answer any questions. If you go back and you look through his interviews, he doesn't actually say anything of any substance. So his pontifications, to use a phrase, really don't have any basis on anything Catholic, on any real specific nature of the teachings of the church. It's just a bunch of filler words to sound like he's saying something that doesn't have any bearing on anything.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where, okay, so in Mike Lewis's article, he writes, because Cardinal Burke wrote the preface to this book, and he had some things to say. So Cardinal Burke has become almost a caricature of this approach, such as when he recently wrote that the secular terms accompaniment and integration are used without grounding them in the truth of the faith or in the objective reality of our life in the church. The cardinal opined that the use of these words suggests that perspective of eternal life is eclipsed in favor of a kind of popular view of the church in which all should feel at home, even if their daily living is an open contradiction to the truth and love of Christ. Never mind that we are all sinners and that each of us is missing the mark when it comes to living the truth of Christ. Cardinal Burke apparently believes that for some sinners, the church should not be a home. That's not what Cardinal Burke believes. It has nothing to do with if you're a sinner. So my thing is they know they're lying. Like they know that's not what Cardinal Burke is saying. It's not what he's saying.
So this is the intellectual dishonesty of the entire Pope-splainers movement, is that they are so bent on making sure that everything fits with their leftist ideology. They're going to do anything that they can to ruin the reputations of what their perceived opposition is.
It's so ironic that they talk about us being the ideologues because first off, you even saw Father Matthew Schneider, as soon as he got the cue that like there might be another round of COVID coming, he starts running back in with this vaccine stuff. He's going on and on about it. And I'm like, I thought we're the ideologues. What are you talking about? Like, after everything that's come out about these things, you're still going to tell people they have a moral imperative to get this thing? Like, I just don't. It's preposterous to me. But the idea that Cardinal Burke thinks that the church should not be a home for some sinners, no. What we're first of Rob, what you were even saying, like the church has never just allowed people to believe whatever they want to believe.
Michael was saying that.
Oh, Michael said that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What were you?
You said like the church has never just allowed people to believe whatever they want to believe be a member.
No, in fact, it's a condemned proposition. Let me pull up the quote. I have it right here.
Yeah, Matt, that's actually like that's pretty like So I actually got to a point, right? When me and Rob first started doing this, we were like, okay, we're never going to criticize anybody in the hierarchy. Let's just try to do some shows and we'll see how it goes. But what happens is listening to the gaslighting from the left forced me in to start having these conversations because I was tired of being told I'm a bad Catholic for seeing what is right in front of my eyes. Like I'm not, I can't square the circle anymore. And I'm not here to say somebody's a heretic or anything like that. I'm just saying these things are problematic, and Catholics of goodwill need to hear people say you're not crazy for seeing these things. Like this is not normal.
So you have the condemned proposition from Pius IX, Syllabus of Errors. It says, and you have to remember, this is condemned. Every man is free to embrace and profess the religion which, guided by the light of reason, he shall consider true. Condemned. That's a condemned proposition. So if it's condemned, that means you can't believe it.
So that goes right to the freedom of religion thing.
Yes, it does.
It's condemning dignitatis humanae, right? Right in that, right?
Which is why you it's like you said, you can't square a round hole, or you can't make you can't square the circle. Thank you. You can't triangle the hypotenuse or whatever.
Anthony doesn't know what
it gets to the point. It gets to the point of denying reality, and I've made the comparison of like it's essentially a man wearing a dress and you telling me I have to call him a woman. It's the same thing. Like don't tell me I'm crazy that this synod is not trying to overturn these things. There's no goodwill going into this thing. There's a very specific intent on what they're trying to do, and you're not crazy for noticing that. Well,
of course, because what happens afterwards, Pope Francis is giving an interview with somebody who says, so, we're concerned about the synod changing doctrine, and, how is that going to play out? Are we going to be able to, interact with people and see the proceedings so that we can understand the development of things? And he says, oh, no, it's all going to be secret. It's all going to happen behind closed doors. So trust us. It's going to be good, guys.
So it's not going to be open to reporters to let us know these conversations that are having. And his thing is, he says, well, no, people have to be free to have these conversations openly. So when somebody says, are you going to change doctrine? We're very worried that you're going to. He doesn't say, no, that's not. The church's doctrine is settled. We just want people to be able to voice their opinions, and we're going to try and show. It's just.
Well, and you have to understand, this is why it all comes back to Teilhard de Chardin. It all comes back to the modernist belief that that doctrine and dogma evolves. In fact, Pope Francis used that very word last week. This week. No, last week.
It was last week. It was last week where he actually said the phrase evolution of dogma, which is condemned also in the Syllabus of Errors.
Well, I mean, the thing is,
no, it's in Pacendi. In Pacendi, it's condemned. Pacendi is where it's condemned.
Evolution, by its very nature, supposes that one thing can become something else. That's what evolution suggests. Development is like a child growing into a toddler, or an acorn growing into a sapling. That's development, because it's still operating within species, and it's still the growth of what already is. And it's within the blueprint, within the DNA of the substance itself. But when you're talking about evolution, you're talking about a human sprouting feathers.
Yeah.
And saying, well, that's an evolution of doctrine. Mutation. That's false. You can't do it because it contradicts the very DNA of the idea itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and evolution itself, even biological evolution, is preposterous for those same reasons.
Sure.
A thing can't become something different than it is. Like you can have a creature can adapt, right? So when they brought boar from Europe to America, they developed tusks over 100 or 200 years, but that boar doesn't become a frog or doesn't become a dog, right? It's not, there's no mutation that's going to happen where it becomes a different creature. So
but this is why all of this is so connected with the trans movement. Why is the Synod so focused on accepting transsexuals?
Yeah.
So they're talking about the evolution of doctrine, and they're talking about the acceptance of transsexuals. It's almost in the same sentence. So why the connection? And it all goes back to the very idea that something can become what it isn't. And it has to do with the very first fall in all of history. And that was the fall of Lucifer. What did Lucifer say? I will become like God.
Oh, yeah.
I will become. That's a statement of transition.
Yeah.
He's the first trans being. So then he gets kicked out of heaven. He goes to Eden. And what does he say to Eve? Oh, you're not going to die. You will become like gods, plural, meaning lowercase g. So he's telling Eve, you can be something you're not. And then, of course, all through human history, you have these chimeras, which are, like dog-headed men and that kind of thing. Then you have the idea of evolution, and you have alchemy, which says you can transmute lead into gold. Okay. All of this idea of changing the nature of a thing is based on a false principle. God created everything according to its own kind. There is no transition of nature.
And this also goes into not just the trans issue at the synod, but also deaconesses at the synod, and which is also going to get into, because once they push that, they're going to look for an ordained priestess. Like this is all about the nature of man and woman that they're trying to upend. And we were even talking about it a little bit in the green room before the show. The idea that because I saw a quote from a woman saying, I'm already doing all the work of a priest. I'm doing all this stuff. Why don't I get the title? And there's nothing more pharisaical than wanting a title and recognition from the people around you. Like, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. You want the title? Go ahead. You've received your reward. But you can't get a title for something that doesn't exist. You cannot be like, what do Anglican priests that are in, like, female Anglican are they priestesses? What do you call them? Do you call them mother? What do you call them? Like
bishopess?
Yeah, what they don't have, like, you call a priest father, but what do you call the priestess?
Yeah. Well, they don't have father title for their priests either.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, call no man father, and that's
Oh, okay. I didn't even know. I thought they kept that in the Anglican Church. I guess not.
Kennedy knows what you call them.
Yeah, but he's not even wrong, because almost 99% of the time they are, and they're almost always activists, right? Mm-hmm. So every time you hear a sermon from a woman claiming to be some kind of a priest, it's always this activism behind what they're saying. They're always trying to fix some ill. They're just activists. They're leftist activists every single time.
Sure. Well, and again, going back to the whole deaconess issue, it's just a stepping stone. They're just looking for an excuse to find a way to put women in positions of power so that they can then simulate the sacraments. The Old Testament actually addressed this issue when Miriam, Moses' sister, decided she also wanted to be a priest. You know what happened to her? She got stricken with leprosy.
Yeah.
She had leprosy, which is the worst of all diseases. And it wasn't until she repented that, and she actually had to be separated for a while, and the leprosy went away. But she contracted leprosy because she desired to have a position that was not proper to her, to women.
Yeah, people. Okay, so you'll hear the argument all the time that, well, the reason men were priests is because it was a sign of the times, and that this is, but
which
that's so
is the exact
ridiculous
opposite.
Because it's the opposite, right? That every other religion had priestesses. The only one that didn't was Judaism. Essentially, It was a male-only priesthood, which really separated them from all these other religions that were out there. All the other religions, all in paganism, you either had female priests or you had men castrating themselves, dressing up as women. It wasn't anything like Judaism. Judaism had an all-male priesthood, and it was never allowed to be different. And when Paul is saying the things that he's saying, that women should not I should not suffer a woman to teach, it's because he knew if you put women in certain positions, it goes bad. It's like he talks about single women being busybodies. He's like, tell this woman, go make her do something. She's just being a busybody and gossiping too much.
So there is the psychological aspect of it, but there's a metaphysical reality to it also. If a woman was up there on the altar confecting the Eucharist, then the church is a lesbian.
Yeah.
Because what happens, the priest on the altar is acting in persona Christi, which means he is in the person of Christ. And at the consecration, he is using his masculinity to actually participate with the church, which is a male-female union. That can't happen with a female. Yeah. Metaphysically, it is impossible.
Yeah, man, it's you could just see all of the push going in one direction. There's never any resistance, and especially the people that are being elevated right now, there's not one of them that are like you saw even I guess Barron is going to this thing, right? So they'll throw you a bone like that, but Barron's not exactly like a beacon of traditionalism. He's a very moderate guy. I mean, I do think that he still believes the Catholic faith. Like I don't think he's on the same level as some of the other guys that are going, but I'm wondering what moment's going to come for him because I think that Strickland has had like the scales removed from his eyes where he fully sees what's going on right now, right?
Yep, completely.
So I think he sees the thing and he's like, you know what? They already marked me. They already gave me an apostolic visit. I'm just going to preach the truth because what are they going to get me on?
Right.
Saying truth. He hasn't said anything about Francis. He's just stating Catholic truth. So for them to remove him, I think it'll be tricky for them. Do you think?
Oh, of course. I mean, one of the things that I've heard is that, I don't like to deal in rumor. What I can say is this: if they want him out, they're going to find any excuse possible, and they're going to look for every possible reason to get rid of him. So they'll look for a financial scandal, or they'll look for something improper in the books. I mean, if you can't get Capone on murder, you're going to get him on tax evasion. That's kind of the approach.
Yeah, it's like Trump. Like look what they're doing to Trump. Wait, I actually want to ask you about that too. Okay, so I want to ask. Actually, you know what, Michael? Do you have a heart out?
No.
All right. So look, we're gonna end this on YouTube. We're gonna go to locals. I want to. Okay, we're not immediately, but we go over to locals. We can get a little more spicy, and I got to ask you some things that I can't ask you on YouTube because I'm very curious to know your evolution of thought over the past 10 years, and if anything's changed after the past few years. So go ahead, Rob. What'd you have?
Well, we just got 2 questions here. We should get to.
Of course.
Okay.
The first one was actually asked before the show even started. Someone was claiming that Teilhard advocated onanism. They weren't sure what that was referring to and couldn't find anything.
Onanism is when
no, they know what onanism is.
Oh,
they know what that is. They're wondering where Teilhard may have condoned that.
Yeah, I have heard that, but I've not been able to substantiate it. I can't find the document where that actually happens.
I'll be honest with you, that's the least controversial thing I heard all night. I mean, he's talking about the demonic here, so I can't imagine.
Well, so was onanism actually, but
yeah. And then Nick from the Traditional Thomist wants to know, in your opinion, what should we do if or when the Synod actually attempts to change doctrine?
Okay, so he's asking on a practical level.
Yep.
Quite honestly, let's take a worst case scenario. Let's say that they not only declare that women can be deacons, but they also declare that homosexual relationships are now an integral part of the Christian life, and that transgenderism is a possible thing, and we have to accept them as they are. Let's say that all of that is now something that's put forward. You still stand on truth, and truth is its own defense. So the minute they start putting forth these ideologies, you don't participate in it. If it comes down to how the Mass is being performed, well, unfortunately, it has the potential to invalidate Masses, at which point you can't go. Yeah. And you wind up in the same situation that the Christians were in, or the Catholics were in Akita, Japan, after the shogunate shut down the borders, and they kicked out all the Catholic priests, and you had Catholics who were in Japan for 250 years without any priests. But you know what? They passed down the faith family member to family member for 250 years by reciting the rosary, having a veneration for Our Lady. They retained whatever books they possibly could. And so they would read their prayers from those books. They kept them in secret. And they would baptize their new babies. And
that was the movie Silence, right? So the movie Silence.
That movie is a terrible movie. Don't watch it.
No, well, you can watch the first 80% of it.
Yeah.
And then turn it's a beautiful movie up until like the last half hour.
Because the whole point of that movie is that apostasy is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you don't mean it.
Right.
It's terrible. I would say, yeah, okay, that could be a worst case scenario, but I don't think that will be how it goes. Just judging by how Francis does things, you're going to get
you'll get wishy-washy statements that allow people to interpret in multiple different ways.
You're just gonna get some ambiguity and some nonsense with a footnote or something like that, and it's going to be on paper the Catholic faith will remain the same, but in practice they're going to be blessing these unions in some way that they figured out how. But no, this is just for the ones that are chaste and living out there. But it's going to become a blessing of same-sex unions. That's just what's going to happen.
Right.
Because that's how everything happens. But all right, so we're going to jump over to locals, guys. It is free. You only get to comment if you're a paid member. I hope people do become a paid member, but you guys can watch where we're going for free. I want to get into some